Oh, sorry. Okay, I was playing music. Welcome to Generation Movie on a Wednesday night. My name is JW Colwell, joined as always by the accomplished, the incredible, the effervescent Rich Drees. How you doing tonight, Rich?
I'm doing pretty well. Glad to see you guys weathered the hurricane and all the bad weather.
The second one,
yeah,
where it just formed in like a minute. We also I also was up late last night watching rockets from the coast, which was super cool. I put the video on Facebook for anybody who wants to see it, who's a friend of mine. It was incredible. I got up at like 1:47. I was up. I was donking around doing things, and I got the video, and like it was clouds, so it was like fire, clouds. It looked like mortar. Fire, clouds, fire. Super cool. And then I did a video before to show you what the sky and the south looked like, and then after, and then I also got one as it was hurtling towards the moon, which was also super cool because it's like fire, and the moonlight was white, so it was like yellow going, like it's super cool. But that's one of the cool things going on, and fire's good. It's one of the cool things going on in Florida. But welcome out on a Wednesday night.
Needing cool things to happen there right now.
Yeah, NASA's about it. Everything else, Disney's charging more money. Things are a little bleak. Anyway,
I read an interesting critique of Disney, and I was like, holy shit, that's exactly how I feel. I don't know how to go to Disney. They have like these speed things and these fast passes, and you got to sign up for certain things like 2 days ahead of time.
You want to go to Disney?
No, I don't. But if I were, I would need a college level course to describe how to do this trip anymore. It seems ridiculous.
Two things. I would recommend getting a travel agent, and I have a friend who can help you. She's very good. Yeah, well, no, but she's very good. She's from your area. I went to high school with her. She's amazing. Her name's Missy. Fantastic. Okay. She does a whole travel thing. Secondly, if you decide to come to Disney, I will go with you.
I know that.
But we'll walk around and we'll do things. But anyway, it does require a lot of stuff, and they just changed a bunch of things, and
it sounds like a lot of hassle, and I have a low threshold for that some days. I'm just like, you know what?
Well, it's rewarding hassle. Like Galaxy's Edge for you would be really cool. You'd really enjoy Galaxy's Edge because it's minutia. Like I'll give you a minutia Galaxy's Edge detail that you would get a kick out of. So there's a language. There's Arabic is the language. I have my Magic Disney band is in Arabic. It has JW in Arabic. Anyway,
nice.
If you're reading Arabic, there's a section of Galaxy's Edge where you can fill your water bottle. If you look down, though, and you're reading the alphabet that's there, it's a warning sign. It says water is contaminated. Don't drink it. So there's something really funny and perverse about like people not just doing what's in front of them and not reading or paying attention to stuff like that. But yeah, it is a hassle that I would say there are people that can help you with that. Joe's chiming in early tonight. Good evening, gentlemen. I swore off Disney years ago. My mother, wife, and daughter still go. Yes, I don't swear off Disney because it has Star Wars stuff going on. Also, it has Guardians of the Galaxy stuff going on, and also Pixar stuff. All things I really love. So I can't swear off of it. Plus, I have like 2 little nephews right now, so everything's cool. Someday they'll like Universal more, but right now they like Disney more. So here we are on a Wednesday night. Big stories, and like right now, Wakanda Forever is doing very well at the box office. David Zaslav is pissing off the Directors Guild of America.
Good.
Because
I want them mad at him because they will decimate him.
He's not. I don't know how this guy. Like, I think he likes to bark orders at people. I think he got used to doing that at Discovery because all the underlings at Discovery are like, yes, sir, yes, sir. And now he's dealing with Hollywood people, and I don't think it's going to go well. But, go ahead, cancel a giant project that was designed to make directors more diverse and help women get behind the camera. And by all means, cancel that program. Yeah, by all means, cancel that product. Cancel Batgirl. Just cancel everything. Just and by all means, treat all of your directors and your creative people as if they worked on some show where a married couple knocks down a retaining wall. That should go well. That should go well for you.
It's like I've said always. So much in that business is relationships and liking other people, or at least being nice to other people, or and when you come in like a bull in a china shop like Zaslav has, I wonder what kind of damage he's doing to those relationships. We already saw Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers already screwed up with the whole shifting of their 2021 slate to streaming. Pissing off, people like, some of the directors there. And,
well, they're not gonna feel that until July when Oppenheimer hits. Then they'll understand the concepts of upsetting the great and powerful Nolan.
Exactly.
But yeah, so it's one of those things where I think the ripples in the water are almost as bad as what's occurring under the water. You know what I mean? So, but we have a movie tonight, but we want to get you want to talk about Albert Pyun, right?
Yeah. Albert Pyun is he's a great B-movie director. He's directed a lot of fun stuff, specifically for, the purposes of our show right now as we
1982, baby.
He did The Sword and the Sorcerer, which I know you love.
A fantastic movie. A wonderful, wonderful, amazing, full of boobs and swords and murder. And the kind of thing when you're 8 or 9 years old, you can only dream of. He's made a ton of great movies, like a ton of great B movies. Cyborg, for all the 90s fans out there. Kickboxer too.
That Red Brown version of Captain America that came out in 1990.
Yes, with the bike and the Red Brown and the craziness. Nemesis, which is a fun movie. Doll Man, Alien, which is really good.
Which made for a great Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode. But
he's a great, fun director that made a lot of movies that didn't necessarily get released, but if you were a video store kid like you and I were, they were on the video store shelves. You rented them. You watched them with your friends, ordered a pizza, and,
He was also at, I think it was at Canon. And if I'm wrong on that, I apologize. But when he was developing a Spider-Man film, and I remember reading that script and thinking this is not great. But ultimately, that kind of iteration gave way to James Cameron's almost happening, and then all that legal mishigoff before we finally got to Sam Raimi. But I'm seeing some reports on Facebook and other social media that he is not well, and they were asking for like greetings and well wishes from his fans. In the last couple
So
of years, he's
is
been
there
very open about he has some degenerative brain issues, Parkinson's. I can't remember if it was Parkinson's or dementia. I have one parent with one and the other, with the other, and so it's sometimes I get a little crosswired on, which who outside of my family has what. But he talked very frankly on Facebook for a long while about, as he was struggling to pull together his final film, Interstellar Civil War. And he talked about how it was getting tougher and harder for him to do that kind of work. And irregardless of what you feel about his overall oeuvre, I was very impressed with how candid he was about his struggles, and I thought that was something very, very moving. But if you are at all a fan of his work, Collider, I know, had a story on it. You can pretty much probably find fairly easily.
I think it's a great call to arms for our show.
Yeah.
Just send something out.
And just say, hey, thank you so much. And if you're helping to bring him a little comfort in what is probably, sounds like his, final few hours, days, weeks, months, I don't know, left on this planet, let him know he did some good for you.
And we were talking a little bit for our purposes, right? The Sword and the Sorcerer. Yes. We're not covering it. And for we came in late in the year, so when we started the show, it wasn't really on our list. But I will say to you, one of the little tidbits you can find about, first off, it's a fantastic movie. It's got a shooting sword. It's got evil demons. It's got a lot of boobs. It's got a lot of blood. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I noted, and one of the things you can read up on, it is the highest grossing independent film of 1982. It grossed $36 million, mm-hmm. which is, that's a lot of goddamn money. And we're, especially when the movies we've been talking about, like the Halloween 3s, the movie we're going to talk about tonight, CREEPSHOW, they did not outgross The Sword and the Sorcerer. So even like, he was a talented guy, and he's still a talented guy. And if we give him, I think one of the things we can do on our show and in general as fans is, if you love something or love actors or directors, make sure they know it. Don't hold back. We're not going to have Mark Hamill forever. We're not going to have Harrison Ford forever. We're not going to have all these people forever to be able to go, hey, your work inspired me, or your work made my childhood better, or your work made me a lifelong movie fan, right?
Growing up, my mom made it very much a point after birthdays, Christmas, that we, as kids, sent out thank you notes to whoever sent us stuff.
I could totally see you being a thank you note person.
I'm not as good at it now. In terms of
writing,
we're
never as good at it. We're never as good as it when you have the adults hanging over us going, you should write a thank you note.
Okay, Mom.
Okay.
But I've kind of internalized some of that. So when I get to meet certain people who have worked on things that I've really, have really made an impact on me. Like the one time I got to meet Ray Harryhausen. He was doing a book signing and then a screening of Jason and the Argonauts, and then doing a little Q&A afterwards.
I'm very jealous of you right now. That's a big drop. That's a big drop. Okay.
I said to him, thank you so much for so many flights of imagination you helped me take as a kid. And he said, oh, you're most welcome. I had a great time making these films. You're letting them know that work is appreciated. And I don't know of an artist who could ever hear that too much.
and to add on to that, right? So it's not only like a Harryhausen for as example, but Aberpayoon, for example, right?
Yes.
When you tie in Harryhausen not only made our childhood better with our parents' childhood better, right? And your dad or your mom or whoever you watch movies with showed you those movies. But they might have inspired other people. Like, think about the Harryhausen inspiration in, say, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Or, you know, like, you don't have the Freddy Bones sequence without the skeleton sequence of Ray Harryhausen.
You don't have hollow chess in Star Wars without Harryhausen influencing Phil Tippett.
Yeah, so it's the amount, the people we love, and so a couple things. Let's see. Jerry writes, haha, I rented every one of the movies you mentioned. Yeah, Jerry and I share a brain on weekends. It's amazing. Gelta Kent, good evening, friends. It's Ken. I'm banned on Facebook, so here I'm on YouTube. Okay, sorry you're banned. Why? Don't be banned on Facebook. Be a good boy. But it's good to have you. We're glad you're back. We were missing you. I'm like, where the hell is Ken? I'm agreeing with Envy about Rich meeting Ray Harryhausen. Yes, yeah, yeah, it's a name drop. You know, Rich does that. Rich does that. He's a jerk sometimes. Yeah, well, whatever.
Something into the conversation.
Or Basket Case, or The Gate. Yeah, these are all like part of the thing in this show, and we're gone 60 minutes on the opening tonight, which is usually beyond us, but it's okay because Creepshow is long too, so we'll get to it in a second. But yeah, the idea that these other movies are influenced, you know, thank a filmmaker. Payoon is not necessarily somebody that you'd, you know, equate with Spielberg or anything, but he made a bunch of movies that did a lot of business and put a lot of people in work and helped a lot of people get work. Like, you know, I mean, Van Damme got a lot of work because of him. You know, he's one of those directors though that like he just missed for whatever reason. Like nobody ever I was, you know, shocked in reading that Sword and the Sorcerer grossed 36 million. Although the moment I read it, I'm like, of course it did, because it was fucking awesome. Like it was great. But tonight we salute you, Robert Payoon, wherever you are, and we wish you a safe and speedy recovery, or just peace. Know they have fans. We're two of them. You know, he came up with a sword that shot and killed a sorcerer from across the room. I'm all for it. Try to build it into my D&D characters, everything. You've inspired me in great ways. But tonight we are also inspired to talk about a little movie. It's called Creepshow. It's tiny. I think you know what? One thing that putting these posters up, the 80s taglines are great. The most fun you'll ever have being scared. And being scared is all caps. You know what I mean? Like the posters, like one of the things when you're looking at these 80s movies, the posters are different. They're a little bit better. The marketing is a little bit like it was a little bit like
it pops. I just
more. Think they pop. Like this poster is fucking terrifying. Like it's a creature with tickets. I used to work in a ticket booth like that when I was a kid. It was just bad. But so Creepshow's the movie tonight. I'm gonna be honest. When I rewatched it, I hadn't seen it in a long time, and I did not know it was 2 hours long. Rich, I was like sitting there going, you know, and you click it, and you don't. I wasn't paying attention to the bar at the bottom when you start a streamer, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I paused it to use the bathroom or something, or get a snack or something, and then I'm like, 2 hours. We got 2 hours. And
well, I think it cooks along because of, you know, it's an anthology. We have 5 stories in there plus the wraparound.
Yeah, it's packed. It's packed to the gills. Before we start though, before we get to production, let's if you like all the stuff on our network, Indie Escape Network on YouTube, we have our own channel. Our show, Generation Movie, has our own channel. We also have our own popcorn flavored candle, which is super nice. We'll put that up later. Indie Escape Network also has its own Facebook page. By all means, like and enjoy there. But you start with production. You start with how things get made or why they get made. And Creepshow is an interesting case because there's a secret to why it was being made, and there's a secret why, two of the greatest horror people of all time, George Romero and King, came together, right? I mean, that's the little tidbit that you pick up when you're reading about the production, is that they come together. As Stephen King writes the screenplay, there are elements of Castle Rock and Stephen King places within the movie and within the screenplay. First screenplay is 143 pages, which if you do a minute a page, would be a 2 hour and 22 minute movie.
Yes.
That's a long anthology, my friend. That's when you get into like it's long.
Yeah, this is one where I hadn't actually sat down to like track down the screenplay to take a look at it beforehand. Just unfortunately time crunch this week. But
no worries.
That part of the reason that screenplay might be a little longer is he's resetting everything 5 times. You have to write all new establishing stuff because you're telling a whole new story, a whole new. There's a whole tone that goes through this whole movie that's pretty consistent, but you have to reset everything and then go, okay, here are the new main characters now for the next story, and this is the setting. You have to go through all that descriptive stuff again and again. So I wager at least 5 or 6 extra pages because of that.
Well, and I think
still makes it a long screenplay, but
no, I agree with that. I think the interesting thing here is they come together because Romero and Stephen King are behind the scenes going. Romero's basically saying, I can't get any money to make anything that doesn't have dead people in it. And Stephen King is behind the scenes going, they're optioning my movies and they're not making them the right way. I'm not happy with how The Shining was. I'm not happy how these other things are. I trust George Romero with something I want to be put on screen called The Stand, which would be made 2 other times, right? The 90s miniseries and then the recent miniseries that they just did in the last year or a half or so. But basically they come together because they're trying to make each other more profitable, to be able to say, if you put us together, we can make money. And I think that's the most interesting thing about, like, there are other interesting things about the production, but the idea that these 2 horror heavyweights come together is because they're not getting what they need from Hollywood, or what they think they need from Hollywood, is intriguing, right? I mean, it's kind of this weird, like, and even the poster, when you look at the poster says 2 masters of horror, masters of terror and the macabre, George Romero and Stephen King. But the behind the scenes is they can't get Hollywood execs to pay attention to them. So it's like, we know they're the masters. We know when you walk into a theater and you see that poster, what you're signing up for. And I think that's so intriguing to me, is that they're having trouble getting production money and stuff.
Intriguing or frustrating?
A little bit of both. But I think for me, it's so intriguing that 2 guys have to come together to do this. And then you also tie into it that King brings a few of the short stories over from his books and some of his anthologies himself. And it's kind of it's a little bit, maybe it is frustrating. You're right. Frustrating is a better word than intriguing, but
now I'm not the world's biggest Stephen King fan, but I think this is probably my favorite of his work in film, because there's a sense of fun, there's a sense of dark comedy to the whole thing, which is in keeping with the fact that they're basically kind of riffing off of EC comics from the 60s, and this is almost proof of concept for Tales from the Crypt for, when that debuted on HBO a couple of years later.
Yeah, it's, and also, like, I think it's also some of the side production stuff. Romero, even though he can't get money from Hollywood, is still doing all the things where he normally would do them. So when you talk about additional locations or location filming, almost all of the stuff is filmed in the Pittsburgh area. So it's, Greensburg, Pennsylvania, which is where almost everything, that's where they shot Lonesome Death of Jordy Vermeil. They're creeping up on you. So, like, he still sticks to his own, and he has to. And so, the interesting side note is they bring in other people that are also now considered masters of the macabre or masters of horror, like Tom Savini, right? He comes in and actually comes up with a lot of great makeup and a lot of good things from the production side. And they're looking at it where King adapts a few of his stories. He doesn't move around and do, like, some of them. There's not a lot of heavy lifting. The casting goes pretty smoothly. You have the wraparound story. Again, we get Tom Atkins. It's our second week in a row with Tom Atkins.
Mm-hmm.
He was having a good 1981. And then, they have people that are against type, a cast against type. Leslie Nielsen, E.G. Marshall, who does a really good job with the last story. Hal Holbrook,
too, by the way.
Oh yeah, Adrienne Barbeau. The casting, the idea that they got all these people, to work with it, to come in and do this movie is, kind of like, I would imagine it was one of the more fun sets to be on in 82 or 81 when it was being filmed.
Yeah.
Did you find anything interesting in your travails?
Well, I was looking at a map, and the only thing that they obviously couldn't shoot in Pennsylvania was something to tide you over, because you need a beach and an ocean. And they shot that in New Jersey. And I kind of looked at a map, and it, like, if you drew a straight line from Pittsburgh all the way across to New Jersey to where they were in New Jersey, it's almost a straight line. So they basically hopped on the turnpike and get right through and kept going to the Jersey Shore.
Well, and
they didn't pick somewhere in northern Jersey or southern Jersey. It was like right there, closest point.
That's the magic of Romero, though, right? Romero. Like what's frustrating about the backstory when you read, like, that they were both struggling with Hollywood and they were both trying to figure things out. I don't like Romero. I look at and you go, he produced 2 Dead movies that basically made a ton of money, shot on the cheap. So I don't know how he goes to Hollywood and has trouble, going, people will follow me wherever I make movies. I think it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and I like that it brought them together, and I like that it worked out for us horror fans, but it's kind of like a ludicrous concept that they had to come together because they were trying to make The Stand. I think that's so fabulous. And, and especially because King at the time in the 80s, fighting tooth and nail with Hollywood, right? I mean, fighting every step of the way on The Shining, verbal brawls with Kubrick over The Shining, right? Where, I don't like what you're doing in my fucking movie or my book. You're ruining it.
That's what happens when you get into bed with Kubrick, so to speak.
Well, Kubrick's gonna Kubrick is what I would say there. We had some comments. Let's see what we got. Let's see. Jerry writes, or Basket Case or The Gate. Those are movies he was talking about. Ken writes, The Gate is the best part of it for me. The Crate is the best part of it for me. I tend to agree with you. I tend The Crate or They're Creeping Up on You. But we'll talk about it.
But I think it's a little sloppy. We'll get to that, though.
It's really sloppy. Almost as sloppy as Barbeau.
One
of my favorites. Every story is good. I don't know about every story. We're going to talk about that, Jerry, in a second. Let's see what else we got. Georgia had an online show with Romero's son for a couple years. Yeah, I remember that, Joe. I remember that when we were talking about coming over to the Indie Escape Network. I know you have a Ty CREEPSHOW is a scarier version of the Twilight Zone. Yeah, and also I think there's a Twilight Zone quality to them. I don't know that there is. Here's the thing: when you bring that up for me, Ken, this is where we're gonna have a little bit, because I'm a Twilight Zone person. I watch Twilight Zone religiously. I love old Rod Serling Twilight Zones. I can digest them at a half-hour clip. Just eat them down. I don't know that it's as good as well written as the best Twilight Zone. I think Twilight Zone's better, but that is what I'm saying. 3 grades, King, Romero, Savini. Yeah, Savini before he's a great, and he knocks it out of the park, because the makeup and the effects are pretty great.
Mm-hmm. And Savini shows up as himself, with his own face, in the epilogue there too.
Yes, so, and yes, as a garbage man, because everybody wants to be a garbage man on camera. Ask the Sheen boys. Anyway, yeah, that was a Men at Work reference. I did it anyway. So production gets done. It goes well. There's no, again, this is one of those movies where the only backstory is why they had to come together and make the production in the first place. Right? They film on location in Carnegie Mellon University, Fox Chapel, Pennsylvania. Like you're saying, something to tide you over. Island Beach State Park. So it's not even, it's a state park and it's a beach. They come up with what I think is interesting about the production. Also, they come up with unique ways to shoot the really difficult stuff. So, they work with entomologists at the American Museum of Natural History to come up with the 20,000 cockroaches that they had in the segment They're Creeping Up on You. 20,000. Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. I can't even get by that. And it goes as best as they can. And there's no real bumps. There's nothing in the backstory when we're doing this research, when you and I are working on these things, there's nothing in the backstory that people were fighting. Actually, Romero and King seem very happy on set. They seem very they're pleased with themselves. They're pleased with their actors. There's no fighting. Barbeau and E.G. Marshall and Leslie Nielsen all chomp on scenery. They're all over the top, ridiculous, bigger, better. King gets it. It's not his debut on film. His debut on film is where, Rich? Oh, Rich, come on, you can do it. You can do it, Rich. It's a Romero movie.
Oh, Night Riders.
Yes. So his debut is actually Night Riders, but here he gets to be Jordy Vermeil, which, of course, is a guy who gets a little bit too much meteor shit on him. Things don't go well.
It's an interesting story because it's definitely riffing on Lovecraft's Color Out of Space, and that's obviously and King is a big Lovecraft guy, and you can find a lot of Lovecraft mentions and influences in his work. And I also kind of just look at it too as the green version of the Blob as well.
It's got a very
and gets
yeah. I think it's for me it's probably the worst of the segments, but it has the coolest hook at the end, which basically the world's going to end because the grass is moving, and also it has the obvious Castle Rock tie-in because Jordy Vermeil is 5 miles out of Castle Rock. So I think. I think everything looks good. I think they do a remarkable job in first, the frames, representing a comic book panel, becoming just the idea or concept at the time, right, of having an actor sit there like they're holding a cup in I was thinking of the Ed Harris thing at the beginning, at the beginning of the opening shot of the movie is Ed Harris holding the cup, right? Not opening shot of the movie, but opening shot of the first story. He's holding the cup like he's in a like comic book panel. And I think that's amazingly done throughout the production of the film. The idea of the splash pages, the fun stuff that you get in comic books that you don't necessarily get in any other medium, the jumbled lines behind people's heads, the neon colors around, like showing somebody's surprise and shock. And I think it's amazing.
I was thinking about this too as I was rewatching this this afternoon. I think there's a straight line you can draw, not just from Pittsburgh to the Jersey Shore, but from like Batman 66 all the way to Ang Lee's Hulk. And somewhere in the middle of that line
is CREEPSHOW.
Is CREEPSHOW, where, you know, these are all movies that take a comic book aesthetic or tropes within comics, like, you know, Biff Bam Sock Pow, or sliding panels, or
splash pages,
or, you know, lightning bolts behind someone to signify a certain emotion or what have you. And they all do it in different ways, and I think they're all equally fascinating. And so it's you know, it was
there are varying degrees of success with it as well. Like, I think it works particularly well here because I think they know exactly what they wanted to remake the EC comic days. So production goes well. It ends. It opens on. We are so close to this one. This one we are super close on with regards to actually being there. It opens November 10th, 1982. So we're almost 40 years to the day on doing the show tonight on the 16th. We're 6 days off. It opens on a Wednesday and on November 10th, 1982. It grosses $5 million in 1,127 theaters. That is high for the amount of theaters. Again, we've talked about this on the show before. It's a lot of theaters. It is the first movie to knock First Blood out of the top spot at the box office. And the 5-day running total at the time, very high, $8 million. Now, when you get into the totals, though, does very well, knocks it out, knocks everything away. But when you get into the totals, Rich, like Halloween 3 and like the other horror films that opened this year, aside from Poltergeist and, you know, a couple other ones that did very well, it was very top heavy. So $8 million. And when you look at it, it only grosses $21 million in its entire run, which is not low, but
it's not a drop off. I mean, it's not a, you know, it's, you know, to not even gross 3 times your opening week is not a good sign, unfortunately.
Well, no, and the thing there is, like,
wait, I'm sorry. 5 million, no, 21. No. I was thinking of the budget being 8 million and thinking you needed 24. Sorry.
No. Budget was 8 million though, so it didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't gross 3 times its budget either. So it, 21 million is what it has. Some places have it at 20 million. So you're talking like the adjusted income though is adjusted for inflation, of course, is 62 million, right? Which is a decent amount for a horror film right now, which would be right on par. But the interesting thing here is I think the reason it, like, first off, they moved it away from Halloween, right? That leads me to believe, like, one of the things when you're looking at these box office totals is sometimes movies move. First Blood was doing way better than anybody thought it was going to do. Coupled with the fact that this is far away from, like, 10 days after Halloween for a horror film, that is a tough spot to open.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because
people are done with spooky season, they're looking at Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yeah, and it's a weird opening, but I understand. Like, I look at it and I go, well, why do you move it? You move it out of the Halloween season because you have a Halloween movie coming out. Who the fuck knew that Halloween 3 was going to be Halloween 3 Season of the Witch? So the people at Warner Bros. Go, okay, we got to move our movie, right? because nobody's going to be Michael Myers at Halloween. Then there's no Michael Myers. I feel if they move it back and it opens near Halloween 3, we might be talking about Halloween 3 making like $4 million. And this movie grossing like 40 million. You know what I mean? At the time. But, and the other side of it, you look at First Blood, it taking up a lot of screens and also taking up a lot of box office. So it's this weird, wonderful, wild, like, it opens on November 10th. It's like we were talking about earlier. It's like before the show, not during the show, but there's a movie coming out called Bones and All. It opens the night before Thanksgiving. It's a cannibal love story movie, Rich. I just look at it and go, you missed, yeah, you had me at Bones and All. But also, it's like, here's my heart. Oh, but where it's opening is going to impact how it does. And in the 80s they were thinking about these things, but this is a disaster, because I think this movie could have grossed a lot more, but it's not necessarily judged on what it does at the box office, right? Because this is also one of those home media things where it's released in 83 on VHS and video disc. It gets Blu-rays, it gets all kinds of stuff as we're progressing out, DVDs. It becomes a mega hit on VHS and beta and all the things throughout the 80s, right? Becomes a tape that people buy and watch over and over and over again. So much so that they've had Blu-rays 2 and 3 and 4 times Blu-rays, where the rights have been transferred around a few times. Scream Factory just re-released it in 2018. So it's a 4K scan of the original camera negative. Second Sight has its own Blu-ray license in the United Kingdom. It's all over the place, right? Where we're looking at, just it's crazy. And box office doesn't always tell us the story. Box office sometimes is only half the story of something. Because this movie arrives, it does okay, but nothing spectacular. How go the critics, Rich? And we'll talk about us afterwards, because I was telling you, like, critical response is pretty good.
Yeah.
If you're looking at
it's sitting at a 65% on Rotten Tomatoes?
65 on Rotten Tomatoes. And if you look at with regards to the audience score, which is something that we take into account, but only, like, I'm always on the lookout for audience scores that are higher or on par with the critics' scores. So, like, for me, I always find it interesting when you have something where the audience score succeeds something, or like whether or not it's one of those freak, people lining up and doing whatever. But the interesting thing here is the audience score is 68%. Tomato meter is 65%. So you're looking at, it's right on par, right? And I think, I think that's interesting, because I think if you would ask me before we did the show where I thought it sat with audiences, I would say it'd be higher, like in the 80s, because it's one of those movies that everybody remembers. It's one of those movies that everybody talks about and goes, first thing when you say an anthology movie, CREEPSHOW's at the top of the list, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean there's, there are other versions of CREEPSHOW, right, that we're going to talk about in a moment when we get to Legacy. But, I think the most interesting thing for me coming into this, I didn't enjoy it as much as I used to. It's weird. Like, I like some of the stories, but I think it's flabby. I think it, and I was telling you, when I realized it was 2 hours long, and I know it's 5 stories, and I know you got to reestablish and you got to, but maybe I'm accustomed to my anthologies being lean and mean, because most anthologies, like even the classic anthologies that came out before CREEPSHOW, right? Like, when you talk about stuff that comes before, and so we're not talking about its legacy, but we're talking about the legacy of anthology on screen. When you talk about something like, what is it, Tales from the Crypt, the 1972 anthology, or Vault of Horror, 1973, right?
I mean, and you're just talking about horror films. We're not talking about anthologies altogether, because
Yeah,
I mean, we could go
horror
as far as back
anthology.
Tolerance, Tales of Manhattan from the 30s.
Right. We're talking horror.
Yeah. Okay.
Something that CREEPSHOW has. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that came up to me was I think there's about 3 stories that are really good. One that's okay, and like 1 and 2 that are like meh. Like, and that's hard for me as a horror fan to say. But you know, I love the crate, but the crate's got problems. I think the E.G. Marshall, They're Creeping Up on You, is probably the best, because he's the definitive rich asshole in New York that gets his comeuppance.
Yeah, it's a outside of like a couple of interactions on the phone and interactions with the one janitor guy through the door. That's all just E.G. Marshall, and he's fantastic. And I know I made a joke about how the wig he has makes him look like Larry Fine of the Three Stooges.
It's a good call. It's true.
Hey Mo, there's cockroaches in here.
The cockroaches. I killed 3 of them already. Yeah, wise guy, certainly.
But I want to go back to the crate for a moment, because I kind of like the idea of the crate, that we found something hidden away, and it has a big monster in it, and that boom, and then we just have to stop the monster. I think you're right, it does get kind of flabby when it tries also to be Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Well, yeah, okay, so we're both thumbs up on They're Creeping Up on You, right?
Oh yeah.
The crate, the Barbeau character is so dominant that very few times in horror films are you rooting for somebody to get thrown into a crate monster. But
yeah, you're rooting for the monster at that point.
You're rooting for the monster. But that's also one of the weird thing about the crate for me. Rewatching it is there's no repercussions for like Hal Holbrook is the villain of the piece. He knows there's a monster in the crate. He puts his wife next to the crate. No matter how bad his wife is, he still should get some sort of comeuppance. But I mean, it's not alluded to. The story kind of ends on it ends with a great visual, right? The panel of the monster eyes with water, the illusion of it underwater is fantastic. But it's one of those weird ones where it's long, because it's not just the janitor and the student, and then the guy goes to his house, and then he figures out he's gonna feed his wife to it. And it's all kinds of long. And it gets unwieldy
at the beginning, which
now
I structurally understand, because hey, you're establishing all these characters
that she needs to be killed. Yes,
life is awful. Although some of that probably could have been trimmed down a little. You're establishing that the one professor has dalliances with some of his students simply because he's trying to get over his wife having passed away earlier, and then you get him called away. And it seems weird that he just kind of up and leaves this party to go check out this box that a janitor found.
Well, and here's the thing: it's really hard to pick. It's baffling, but it's really hard to pick on the crate, because everybody loves the crate, and the reason everybody loves the crate is because the monster is amazing. He's super cool. He's got big teeth and he's got big claws, and he uses the claws, and he has biting. And he does all kinds of cool things. So I think what happens is, when you haven't watched it in a while, I think you look at it and you go, I love the crate. And that's what I was thinking going into it. And then the crate is kind of wonky. Now, other ones, let's see. But it's still good. Like the monster makes it. Something to tide you over. Leslie Nielsen playing a heel, playing a bad guy, really great. Kind of fun.
I wish he had gotten to do that more in his career.
Yes, because he's kind of a good heel. He's kind of fun.
He relished that. He was really just like,
But even that one's kind of like, it's okay. I think that one goes a little too long too for me. But the horror of drowning on a beach is great, but the comeuppance is good too.
For me, something that tied you over, it feels like the most rote of the, of what they're trying to evoke here. It feels very much a standard Tales from the Crypt kind of movie.
It's one note. We're going to kill somebody on the beach. They're going to come back.
I do something horrible, and then something horrible happens to me.
Lonesome Death of Jordi Verrell. Again, I remember the shotgun blast, and I remember meteor shit. And then rewatching it, I totally had forgotten that he has all these dream sequences where he's going to the doctor or going to the university or doing. It goes a little long. King's not a good actor, so you have a couple things there where that's working against it, and it's also one of the ones that I don't know that it lands. I feel just so we're clear, I feel like my horror card has to be taken away from me, but it's one of those things where I'm watching it today going, maybe I'm still off my high from Cabinets of Curiosities that are all like, not all of them, but most of them are pretty astounding pieces of horror cinema in their own rights. Or even something like, Cigarette Burns from the Masters of Horror Show. But I watched that one and just went, okay, I need this one. Like, we need to get to the shotgun quicker.
Tangentially, Cigarette Burns was co-written by Drew McWeeny, who I think is still one of the best film critics and film historians of our generation. He used to write
perfect tangent. That's my kind of tangent. Let's see.
And then was a founder at HitFlix until that site got pretty much nuked. And he's a good follow on Twitter, as long as Twitter still exists. And I subscribe to both of his newsletters, and they're well worth the read.
So we got some comments. Hold on. Jerry writes, "Just tell it to call you Billy." Yep. Ken writes, "Something tied you over. I get the fog vibes at the end." Yeah, it's got fog vibes.
Okay.
I'll
go with that.
Yeah, it's not bad though. That's better than what I was thinking. Leslie Nielsen playing bad guy and the Day of the Animals. Yeah. Well, I think he probably needed it, like, would have done him great justice to do more. We're going in reverse order, by the way. So, Lonesome Death of Jordi Verrell. It's okay. Father's Day is the one that, has a lot of people in it, and it's, how do I say this? It's boring. I
got a question for you about it.
Go ahead. I love your questions because you seem to find derisive pleasure in nuking me every once in a while. Go ahead. Get it out of the way.
The family name in this segment is Grantham. Is Downton Abbey a prequel to this? I so fucking wanted to.
So part of my problem with it, as I'm watching it today, right? Part of my problem with it is that, Ed Harris is walking around the grounds. He's an outsider at this rich grounds. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, Rich, anybody who gets to the grounds and there's that fog and just a bunch of fucking tombstones. You and I look at it and go, wow.
Nope.
Yep, I'm out. Not him. He goes, grabs a bottle off the ground, starts drinking out of it, falls. So this has a lot of contrivances, and then the payoff I don't think is great.
Well, people are always dumb in horror movies. And I have to admit,
horror movies require stupidity.
yes. One, when the monument falls down on Ed and you get that squish, that's a squish that's making no pains whatsoever to try to be realistic. It's just a funny squish noise. And I think that sums up the whole movie to me right there in that one moment.
Yes, it is a lot of fun.
It's a little bit of horror, but we know we're just being tongue-in-cheek and silly about it.
Yeah, and I don't know. I came out of it today, and I remember, like, and this may also be what I was thinking, like, as I think about it, Creepshow 2 always gets a bum rap for not being as good. And maybe, like, Creepshow 2 is brief. Like, I think Creepshow 2 is only, like, 90 minutes. It's 3 stories, 90 minutes, boom, 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 boom. One of which is very good. Probably would be on par with any of the best that we've seen in the original Creepshow and Creepshow 2. Like, I would argue the lake sequence is one of the better Creepshow stories, right? That's utterly terrifying. And so Jerry also writes, "You're nothing but a bunch of vultures." Yes, I want my cake, but
Hey,
and then
go ahead.
I was going to say, then you also get the tie around that has Tom Atkins and Billy Hopkins, who's played by a young Joe King, Stephen King's son, who goes on to have a very valuable writing career. We'll talk about that in a legacy in a second, because maybe reading those comic books got him into writing and stuff. Maybe his daddy got him into writing too. But the wraparound story is actually good. The idea that dad's taking with the comic books, dad has Playboys in his like, it's a weird sequence. The open of the movie is just, yeah, but Dad, what about the dirty books in your drawer? Snooping kid, and then he's like, but you sent me for your cufflinks. Like, and it's bonkers, the tie around. Also the Savini garbage man is part of the tie around because he looks in the magazine that's been thrown out by the dad, and the voodoo doll thing has been cut out already, and we now know that Billy has the voodoo doll, and we don't know if he's killing his dad or just making his dad in a lot of pain for not letting him read the horror comic books.
But you notice too in the animated interstitials between the segments, I think it's between the second and the third segment, we see one of the pages flap over and there's something cut out already.
Yeah, it's the voodoo. Yeah, it's
perfectly set
great.
up, and I know that as a comic book nerd, I'm like, oh my god, who is cutting up a comic?
Why the fuck did you do that? Just make a fucking photocopy of it. What are you doing?
One of those
Get your shit right. Get your shit right. Well, it was Sea Monkeys, wasn't it? It was Sea Monkeys for me.
Yeah, it was like right around the Sea Monkeys.
I always ordered the Sea Monkeys. I always wanted the Sea Monkeys because who the hell doesn't want little monkeys that are from the sea? And then you find out they're just brine. Like, it ruins everything. Ruins life. It's like actually being an adult. It's like real life. But so the movie, I found that the movie, I'm going to say this and I don't mean to offend. I don't know that I liked it as much as I liked it before. And I think I've been dieting on too much serious horror films and serious anthology stuff, and so I didn't have quite as much fun, and I thought it was long, Rich. Like, I didn't like the anti-brevity of it, because I felt like there were places where they could have cut stuff and made them really kind of efficient. And that's just me, though. But it's great. There's greatness to it.
There is some flab on this film that perhaps could be trimmed down, and but overall, though, I appreciate the tone of this movie. This is a movie that says we're a horror film, we're going to scare you, but it's all in good fun, and it's all just
have
fun.
A laugh. No, it is. It's
a little dark, so lousy. Whereas I think a lot of modern horror
is kill yourself. Is like there's nothing fun. There's nothing fun about Hereditary. There's nothing fun about Midsommar. There's nothing fun about them. Like, there are moments of chuckle, but then it's like, oh.
Yeah, and I'll appreciate something that has something to, a movie that has something to say, that has some decent, subtextual things like Invisible Man say. But I wonder if a movie like this coming out now with that sense of fun and silliness about it,
how would it do?
would,
That's a great question.
would people just reject it because it's not the current vogue, or would they embrace it because it's not the current vogue?
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that's a great place to jump into this. Legacy and franchise viability. So first off, it has a movie sequel. It has a television show that premiered recently on Shudder. So it's full on back, right?
Yeah.
Obviously the viability and the franchise viability is there. With everything. And it's been there. It's been there almost nonstop, right? There's never been a moment where things haven't been loved or beloved. Other places of legacy that you have to look at. Anthology films kind of become in vogue, right? So we get Tales from the Dark Side, we get Tales from the Crypt, we get all this stuff that all stems from a love of this movie, right? And it's kind of amazing, actually. There's also a Creepshow 3 that was direct to video, but it wasn't great, so nobody really talks about it that much. But Creepshow 2 was released to theaters and did okay. The shorter movie by far. But the Creepshow TV is doing very well. And anytime you look up and see any kind of a horror anthology, you have to kind of look back and go, without Creepshow, we don't get the Cabinet of Curiosities. I mean, Guillermo del Toro certainly, has carte blanche, but he doesn't, like, the reasons viable is still because you look down on lists of Voodoo, or you look down on like DVD sales, or you look at sales and people realize a Creepshow every Halloween gets bought. You know what I mean? So we have to thank Romero and King for coming together. That's another part of the legacy, right? The idea that these horror anthologies always bring together interesting actors, directors, writers, and to tell these horror stories, because it's some of the most fun that actors get to have, right? What else? What other legacies do we have that jump out at you?
I think there's I think there's a comic now. It's gone full circle. I think there's a comic out now, a new comic series, if I'm recalling correctly, that just kind of uses the overall Creepshow umbrella title to tell a different spooky, scary story, or a couple of each issue. And I think that's what's great. I mean, obviously, the anthology format makes it so flexible. As long as it kind of stays within certain tones, you can tell any kind of fun story.
One, and another side one that immediately came to mind when you rewatch it and you watch the what is it, the Lonely Death of Jordy Verrell. The idea that there is Castle Rock sitting there 5 miles away. We have to look at the idea that Castle Rock has become a major property. Stephen King's legacy on film is now cemented. And also, the idea that I think is most interesting is when you're talking about his legacy, he has sort of gotten to come full circle. So here he's making a movie with Romero because he can't get done what he wants to get done. As we progress through the 80s and 90s and 2000s and the aughts and then the 2010s, right? As we progress through all of them, he gets the power back that he didn't have in the 80s, that he didn't have in the 90s. And he gets that power back, and he starts, working with filmmakers he wants to work at. He gets to remake The Shining. He gets all of his power back. He gets to write a movie for television, Storm of the Century, that ends up being one of the great miniseries that nobody really talks about. They should. And right now at the box office, his name is gold. We're gonna remake it. It comes out. crushes box office records. We're going to remake Salem's Lot. You know what I mean? Like
I think
it's full circle, like getting the comic book.
Yeah, I think part of that is because this current generation of filmmakers who are making It and Doctor Sleep, which is phenomenal.
Really good.
Yes.
We had two 40-year-old sequels, like the 40-year-old, 36-year-old, and 40 sequels. Not all of them have hit at the box office, but the two, Blade Runner 2049, Doctor Sleep, and Maverick, and like they've done a really good job with these sequels that are 40 years off.
But yeah, I'm thinking a lot of these filmmakers though, they grew up, they're our age roughly. They went to they went and saw, Creepshow, or they saw Maximum Overdrive, or they saw The Shining, which is, Kubrick's Shining is fantastic, but it's not the book.
Yeah, the amount of fighting about The Shining is just astounding when you read about it. Yeah. Like from how Shelley Duvall was treated to how Stephen King was treated to how wonky Kubrick was and how in Kubrick's head Nicholson was and how in Nicholson's head Kubrick was. But yeah, I think the legacy, him coming full circle, where he's now in control of his universe.
And he's working with directors who are fans of his material, not just who kind of came in and said, "Oh, I like this book, let's adapt it." They're like die-in-the-wool. They're like the geeks that have grown up to work on Star Wars, or who are now making superhero films because they spent 30 years reading comic books from the age of 10 on up. And it shows because the quality of these adaptions is so much better than it was 40 years ago.
And I think it all starts here, though. The idea that Shining is very successful, comes out. He jumps on with Romero in an effort to try to get something made that theoretically could never be made. It eventually gets made in the 90s. It's a really good miniseries. The second one, not as good, right? The second adaptation, not as good, although King enjoyed doing it. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's as good as the original, but it is one of those things where it's a full legacy adaptation or a legacy where you look at it, where it all started here, where he said, I can be the master of my own domain. You know what I mean? I can be the person that's in charge of my own stuff. We have some comments. Hold on.
Okay.
I lied. Not have comments.
Okay.
They're bad people. But I got rid of them. Thank you. Actually, we did one comment. Seen movies 2 and 3, or I haven't seen movies 2 or 3 on the TV series. 2 is good. Creepshow 2, it's not good. I shouldn't say it's good. It has a good story in there too. There's the Wood Store Indian, the Dime Store Indian is a really good one, and the one about there's a story about a bunch of kids at a lake, and I think it's called The Platform. Is it The Platform? I hate not getting things right the first time.
The Raft.
The Raft. Is it called The Raft?
Yeah.
Okay. But Creepshow 2 is pretty good. 3 I have never seen. Yeah, maybe that gets me to lose my card. I don't know. And the show has been pretty good. That's Greg Nicotero, who's famous for making zombie picks, doing the work and knocking things out of the park on Shudder, and doing very well with that. But the legacy is there, where you look at it like they could make a new Creepshow at any point, a movie, and it gets released, it would have a big weekend. I don't, depending on how close it was released to Halloween. But I think the other legacy that's interesting here is we don't necessarily get movies anymore. The anthologies that are occurring on streamers. They're occurring on television, where the TV has caught up to the medium in a sense. So Creepshow, maybe part of its legacy is that it showed how viable these things could be and how profitable they could be. These anthology movies and shows where you just give somebody free reign for a half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour, and they come out and they do great things with it. And I think that's part of the
Masters of Horror series.
Oh, that's a great show. There were some great episodes. Cigarette Burns is the best because it's about movies. I love Cigarette Burns. It if you can find, it's called Cigarette Burns Masters of Horror.
Yes.
It's a terrifying Lovecraftian kind of thing about movies, about finding, a fanatic film that whoever sees the film ends up, everybody who sees it dies, or kills each other in the theater. It's great. But yeah, I mean, the legacy and viability of Creepshow is always going to be there, because I think it's something like it came from something they loved, right? Which are these EC comic books, these dark comic books from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and they brought it forward. And then, the legacy of Stephen King kind of retaking his empire, retaking his crown is astounding, right? But it's good. It is a well done, although not like, I was thinking about it the other day. I rewatched Tales from the Dark Side. If you ask me right now today if I like Tales from the Dark Side more than I like this, I think I like Tales from the Dark Side better. Because
I don't think I've watched Tales from the Dark Side since college.
Tales from the Dark Side, I feel Tales from the Dark Side's wraparound story is better. Because remember, it's a Lawrence child with Debbie Harry.
Yeah, I remember Debbie Harry,
and she's cooking the child for her dinner party. That's the wraparound. And so I think the wraparound's a little bit better, and I think all three stories don't hit, but they're pretty good. Like, there's a Steve Buscemi, Christian Slater Mummy story. Also, Julianne Moore's in the Mummy story. So you have Julianne Moore, Christian Slater, Steve Buscemi, and I think it's Lot 49. No, that's Cabin to Curiosity. I'm sorry. Whatever it is. So the Mummy one, and then you have Jake Johansson, right? And William Hickey fighting a killer cat. And then you have the amazing James Remar, Ray Don Chong gargoyle story, which is beautiful. Oh wait, we got a couple things. Tom Holland's Twisted Tales, yes. Nightmares, yes. Nightmares. Also, the part of this Creepshow thing, they did bring about all the shows in the 80s that came out of this, right? The anthology shows, Tales from the Dark Side, Nightmares, Freddy's Nightmares is an anthology show that they slapped, basically slapped Freddy onto. Friday the 13th, the series.
Yes.
Right? So all of these anthology shows come after a Creepshow, and again, there's viability there where you don't have them unless you have Creepshow coming out, finding all these filmmakers, and filmmakers getting shots to make these things is a big legacy for this movie.
Yes.
What else you got, Rich? Anything else?
I think that's really it for me that I can think of. Trying to draw some more.
And his son writing is incredible. That his son reading comic books in the movie is now one of the best horror authors on the planet, right? Stephen King's son. Yeah. So I mean,
I wonder how he got that.
I don't. Yeah. Somebody's reading comic books, bad comic books. So before we end tonight, before we ask our stuff and we tell where everybody can find us, I do want to talk a little bit about our brand, right? So we got some big things coming up in the next couple of days. So first off, Alaska Zero presents author Sean Burgess, which is going to be tomorrow night on the Indie Escape Network. So they do a show every once in a while, and it's usually pretty interesting. And they kind of focus on Alaska, which is super cool and totally terrifying to me because I've seen that one Robin Williams movie, Insomnia, that scares the hell out of me. But that's coming up tomorrow night. So he's got all these cool books. Sean Burgess coming up tomorrow night for them. And then our good friend Brandon. Let me move that banner so that we can see Brandon's shining stuff. Hold on. What did I do? Oh, I did it again.
Good.
Hide. Okay.
There we go.
Brandon Brooks coming up. Tom Malloy is joining him on Friday, November 18th at 10 p.m. So by all means, we like everybody to get a good break. A lot of talented people on the Indie Escape Network, and we want to make sure we brought them up and let everybody know that they got some big shows coming up with some big guests this week. Where can people find your stuff, Rich Drees?
Well, glad you asked.
Let me get out my list.
Props, yay. All of my writing can be found over at filmbuffonline.com.
Also, you're changing it to Carrot Top Rich, right? Carrot Top.
Good God,
props.
no.
Props. No.
The other podcast that I do on the regular is the Big Picture Podcast, which I do with my co-host Natasha Bogutsky. We just dropped our most recent episode yesterday, and in it we talk about the passings of some recent people, and then we review both Weird, the Al Yankovic story, and
fantastic.
Yes.
Also fantastic. I talked about this on our show tonight, Loud and Nerdy. Wakanda Forever special.
Also, just in the last couple of days, a new episode of Film Scribes, the official podcast of the Philadelphia Film Critics Circle, just dropped, and I'm on there talking about some of the things I have recently saw at the Philadelphia Film Festival, along with a couple of other really great writers, Steve, Dan, Rich, H. Rich wasn't on that one. Ryan, some really great guys, and there's some good discussion, and we mentioned a lot of movies that are coming up in the next couple of months in various spaces that you're going to want to keep an eye out for. And I can be found on Twitter until it collapses at FilmBuffRich.
Next week, you can be found on Twitter next week. Although the thing you sent out last night you see the thing that went on at midnight last night, where basically told everybody they have to work harder and they need to go to this link and accept their new hours, which their new overlord hours, where basically they have to work 14-hour days and doing everything they can to make Twitter 2 great, or they can just get 3 months severance.
Yeah.
I feel like Twitter's going to fall apart because nobody's going to work there.
No.
Like, I feel like that's part of it. Like, it's not just that he's going to crater it.
And this is some really bad management. I'm experiencing some really bad management recently too.
Well, I think we've all had bad managers, but there's a bad manager, and there's a guy that writes to you at 12 at night on his wonky billionaire schedule and tells you, "Hey, these are your new hours. Suck it up or leave." You know, I think you take the severance, right? You take the 3 months and just go, I can go to any other company or work. I can do something else. And these things don't run themselves. Like these giant things we think run themselves don't. No. So but you can find me on Twitter until it implodes at JW the Movie Guy. Find me on Facebook, also JW the Movie Guy. I also do a little podcast as well as Rich called Loud and Nerdy. That's every Wednesday night at 8. Although next week we will not have a show because we're gonna kind of working to correct things. Also, it's pre-Thanksgiving, and I might have stuff to do before our show at 10 next week. But you can find a great group, Loud and Nerdy, the group. A lot of people in it, a lot of people doing cool things, a lot of puzzles and all kinds of stuff going on. And then, of course, you can find us here every week, every Wednesday at 10. Although we will have one this Wednesday before Thanksgiving, but the following Wednesday we may not have one. We'll talk about that in a moment. We're working on the workaround because Rich has a very big screening he has to get to, and he will not make it. So we don't want to push the movie we're going to do in 2 weeks. So we're going to see what we can do to make that work. But the movie we're doing next week, we're not going to miss, and nobody should want to miss, because we are doing 48 Hours.
This is the movie that turned Eddie Murphy from the star of Saturday Night Live into a superstar.
I would argue megastar. Let's go whatever bigger than superstar is. Okay. Also, and a thing we're going to talk about next week, it is literally the moment he gets on screen, he's a superstar. Like it's noticeable. It's immediate. He takes the movie right out of Nick Nolte's hands. and doesn't give it back. But also it's also the importance in the 80s pantheon and also in the genre pantheon. So this is the movie that changes buddy cop stuff, and not like it's not a buddy cop movie, it's a convict cop movie, but it changes buddy cop movies forever.
Now, a few months ago when we talked about Night Shift, and we talked about how Michael Keaton just explodes onto the screen.
Yeah, it's great. It's not Eddie Murphy exploding though.
No, Eddie Murphy is next level from that here.
Yeah,
and we'll definitely get into more of that.
Well, we'll get into that, and to be honest, it's a hell of a movie. Like it is a gritty, grimy, funny, racially tinged buddy cop movie that changes the genre. So super excited. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's in the top 10 for me because I grew up watching it. So in '82 I was 8 and I got to watch a movie with dirty language in it, and this guy who was tearing people apart in front of other people, and it became something I'm an Eddie Murphy fan through and through. But it's a great movie. We have that next week. Comments, and no, nothing. Sorry. I was excited about comments, and then it's just bots. But thank you for joining us on a Wednesday night. We appreciate all you do.
Yes.
Again, pay close attention to Indie Escape Network and all the great things going on there. If you get to go, this is the last thing. Hearts of the Mystic Folk. We have a popcorn flavor representative candle. Yes, I couldn't think of the goddamn word. Perfect for your Thanksgiving needs. By all means, and they run a great candle shop. A lot of the shows have a candle representation. We are proud to be associated with them. Thank you so much for joining us on a Wednesday. We'll see everybody next week. 48 hours. By all means, watch it. If you haven't seen it in a while, it holds up remarkably well.
Oh, yeah.
Have a great night, folks. Stay safe.
Good night.
And we'll see everybody next week for Thanksgiving.